Hey everybody, and welcome back to the internet once again. I hope you're having a nice Easter wherever you are. Now, I know we all love the entitled parent stories, but I think it's time we branch out and add a little bit of diversity to the stories. So from now on, all of these videos are just going to be a mixture of entitlement or revenge or begging stories or pretty much anything all over Reddit. So this first one comes from Pro Revenge called "Don't Shoot Near My Horse, Your Family Will Hate You When We Tell Them." So I've been riding for close to 20 years and love every moment of it. I was taught by a close friend and still ride with her to this day. So I was over at her place and tacked up two of her horses. One was named Tiger and the other D. I was on Tiger at first, but she was misbehaving, so T switched with me and I hopped onto D. We were going through the back hills and came across 3 a-holes. This is where things begin. So T and I came up over the hill and we could see a small group of guys that were shooting at targets. We stopped and waited for them to motion past us, which is polite with horses, and they didn't stop. Tiger is really laid back, while D is a good girl. She's just young, so she gets nervous, but she's a sweet little thing. She's a pony technically, but still a good girl. T whistled to them, and they looked over, and we motioned that we wanted to go by. They flipped us off and ignored us after that. Now T has gotten feistier with age, so she looks at me, and I'm visibly boiling, so we decide to wait and show them that we weren't backing down. I was on the left of T, and after a few minutes we were considering walking behind them since we have permission to walk through the landowner's property. We were about to move when I looked up and one of the guys had shifted his stance and shot up a couple of rounds. I heard one ricochet off the metal around the targets, and we heard it and then saw it on the ground a couple feet away. I stirred for a second and was wheeling D around as the men laughed and T let loose with a few choice words and we took off. The little pony can run like heck when needed. Tiger was fat at the time, but she was up D's tail as we fled. We stopped halfway up the next hill and I could tell T was livid. I was trying to calm D as Tiger panted and I was raging once we all calmed. T was on her phone and jumped off. She gave me Tiger's reins while she walked the half/quarter mile back to take photos of the 3 a-holes. She stomped back and we went a different direction to go around them to finish our ride. We got back to her house and she asked if I was okay with tacking our Tiger while she made a few calls. I told her I'm fine, and she walked off. I could hear shouting from her house all the way to the barn, but I didn't say anything since it was better that I didn't call about it. She came out after a half hour or so. She called the landowner, and he was furious. His nephew was watching the property, and he asked if he could go shooting on his little dry shooting range. The landowner told him to always yield to the horse riders in the area since he didn't want to hurt us. T went to talk to him to show him the photos of the 3 a-holes, and he confirmed a-hole 1 was the one with the rifle. The landowner had cut the vacation short to come back and get it sorted out. I didn't see what happened, but according to T, the nephew got his butt kicked by the landowner and his family shunned him for about 6 months due to the danger he put us and our horses in. If one of our horses had been hit, he would have ended up on the ground at the least. He was banned from the landowner's property for the rest of his life. The Hills family brought us an apology gifts of wine and a few gift cards to the local tack shop. I went to get new halter for my horse since he broke it again, and the gift cards had $200 on it. Well, it just goes to show you should never be too cocky that you think you can treat people badly, because things can always catch back up with you. Alright, so this next story is from Malicious Compliance. We haven't done one of those before, and it's called "Not Allowing Me to Drain My Catheter Bag? Enjoy the Orange Juice." So a bit of backstory. I was born with a medical condition that requires a penis reconstruction at 3 and had to start catheterizing at 21 to prevent scar tissue from closing up my urethra. This was back in 2009 when I had my last major surgery. The idea was that the surgery would be done, I would be sent home for the month and indwelling Foley catheter to allow it to heal. Once it was taken out, I would start catheterizing. Okay, onto the story. A week had gone by since I left the hospital and was able to walk around fairly well. I worked at a fast food joint back then and was fed up with lying around all day at home. My manager at the time was cool and allowed me to work at the drive-thru booth taking orders. All I asked was to sit on a chair, since standing with a catheter for hours on end is painful, wear tracksuit pants, as the work pants they gave were too tight around the catheter, and allow me to bring a water bottle so I could drink it without having to walk to the front counter when I needed a drink. All was good for about a week. The problem started when a staff member complained that I kept ducking out every 30 minutes to go to the toilet. Now, it's true I did, because catheters fill up and require emptying, but thankfully, the booth and the toilet were very close to each other, so the time it took for me to leave the booth, drain the bag into the toilet, then come back was about 15 seconds. The staff member held me up one day and chewed me out for being freaking useless. I told him he was getting pissed at me taking 15 seconds to drain a bag, but found it fine to waste 5 minutes trying to tear me a new one. In that time, I wasn't taking orders and he wasn't grilling burgers. The manager who allowed me to work also had gone on maternity leave, and the manager who replaced her was useless. The manager sides with the arsehole's staff members and ordered me along the lines of, either bring a container with you to piss in or don't come to work. We're not paying you to go to the toilet every 30 minutes. For those of you that have had catheters, you'd know what comes out of those. It's not just urine, it's blood and pus too. It needs to be drained. So from that day onwards, until the catheter came out, every shift I took a large drink cup and drained the bag into that. I left the cup in the drive-thru while I worked and emptied the cup into the toilet at the end of my shift. However, like I said, catheter urine comes out with all sorts of nasty stuff in it, so what could have been drained and flushed down the toilet is now sitting in a cup in the booth for hours, and it was hot inside. Now, just on face value, it looked like I had a cup of orange juice, but to the trained nose, it smelled like it was just squeezed from oranges picked from Satan's orchard. The booth smelled like warm, fermented urine, blood, and pus, which customers complained about. The back area of the kitchen then began to reek of it. It got into the air vents, it stuck to people's clothes. The staff member who started it all worked in the kitchen, so imagine working in an environment already piping hot, only for this smell to merge with the heat and then hit you. Eventually, the useless manager scrounged up enough brain cells to realize that his solution created a catastrophe, and he allowed me to go back to drain the bag into the toilet as required. Oh, and in case you were wondering how I put up with the smell, that's easy to explain. I was born with a congenital anosmia, meaning I was born without a sense of smell. And in case you were wondering about my hand sanitation, I'd handled plenty of these catheters prior, so I made sure I carried both hand sanitizer and keep the valve dry and clean. Ugh. See, aren't these non-entitled stories just wonderful? That sounds pleasant. See, the moral of so many of these stories is just be reasonable. If somebody has a medical condition and needs to go to the bathroom, you should probably just let them do it. Because things get a lot messier when you try to control people. So the next story comes from another board we've never read from called I Don't Work Here, Lady. It's called Compulsive Complainer Comes to My Actual Work and Lies to My Manager. So a few years ago I worked at a petrol station and the company owned supermarkets as well. My uniform was all black and had neon green edges on the polo with Company Petrol embroidered on the sleeves, back and front. The supermarket has white and green checkered shirts and couldn't look any different. After a shift one afternoon, I stopped by our company's supermarket across the road to get something for dinner and spotted one of our regulars who was a compulsive complainer. She once complained to me that our fuel pumps were too clean, just to give you an idea of the kind of woman I'm talking about. This is the interaction I've had with her in full uniform at the produce section of the supermarket. So she says, "Excuse me, all your bananas are bruised. Go get some more." I say, "Oh, sorry, I don't work here. I work across the road. The produce manager was just here, so go let him know." She says, "I know you work across the road, but this is company. You work for company. So fix this before I file a complaint." I say, "Go ahead, you look pretty stupid complaining about bananas being sold at a servo." She huffs and storms off, returning quickly with the produce manager. So the produce manager comes up and says, "Excuse me, sir, this woman here told me you were very rude. I'm going to..." "What did you say to this woman exactly?" I said, "She demanded I got fresh bananas. When I told her I don't work here, she threatened to come..." "He told me to F off. I am now demanding you fire him." Some random legend who has apparently been watching this whole time says, "Mate, you should F off, you entitled beesh. How stupid can you be?" She stormed out of the store. After I'd finished shopping, I walked back across the road to my car in the staff park outside my petrol station to see the constant complainer in a heated discussion with my manager through the windows. I went inside to clear things up. She says, "That's him. That's the rude man." The manager says, "Hey, can you explain what happened over there?" I say, "She demanded I get fresh bananas at the supermarket. When I let her know I didn't work there, she went off to..." "Don't lie, you stupid beep." My manager says, "Can you come around behind the counter, please?" I go through the secure door to get behind the counter, looking obviously confused because compulsive complainer has a smug "I got you now" look on her face. The manager says, "Lady, you have to leave. My employee would never act this way, and we have a no tolerance policy on abusive customers." She says, "I'll have your jobs for this. You can't treat a customer like this. Never in my life has anyone been so rude to me." My manager says to me calmly while she's screaming at us, says, "Call the police." She froze while I went to the phone and started dialing the police. She was obviously weighing up her options, as for some reason she thought her best course of action was to run. Now, I don't know if anyone's seen a 60-plus woman in raised flats try to do a 180 degrees and sprint across the vinyl floors, but it resembled small kids trying to sprint across ice flats. I put the phone down, my manager printed her picture for the do not serve list, and we went on with our lives. She never came back while I was there, but I saw her today in the same supermarket complaining about something meaningless to a poor kid. This woman probably has dementia or something. She just thinks everyone is an employee everywhere. I love how she just says, "Never in my life has anyone been so rude to me." It's like, well, you've had a pretty easy life if that's the worst thing you've ever encountered, I have to say. Oh yeah, so for those of you guys who watch a lot of my videos, do you remember a couple days ago of the guy who worked at the fast food place and he fed the cops, and then that crazy lady with the kids came and like spilled a drink all over his stuff, and like I think they like hurt his ribs or something? Well, that guy came back with a follow-up story. So it says, "So I'm back and I've got good news, guys. If you haven't read my first part, here's a link. I'll include a link to my video where I read that story. I think it was 2 days ago. It was in the video with the lady who crashed the cars." So it says, "Now as you guys know, I had an incident with an entitled mother and her 2 entitled goblins. Well, we caught this lady. Yeah, we caught her. The next day after the incident, I talked to my boss and I explained the whole situation to him and the police officers. The footage was okay, although the way I was sitting and talking to my friend, it did look somewhat like I was recording, but I swear that I wasn't. Turns out, our cameras do have hearing, but since I was sitting in the corner, it couldn't hear my friend, but it does show me moving my mouth since I was talking. I had come way earlier in the day, and later around 9-ish, the officers had come back and told us they'd found her. So we went back through the details, and I'd already told them I was pressing charges. Today was the actual court date, and wowee, crap happened. This lady literally went nuts. She literally arrived late, had an attitude while her little turds refused to be quiet while the judge talked. We did have lawyers, and she either couldn't afford one, or was so dumb she thought she didn't need one because she was right. So the courts provided one for her or something. We went on as the camera footage was shown, and this kinda pissed me off. The judge thought I could have been recording, and this is happening while the entitled mom's kids are wailing. He calls a recess, and so we go out for a bit, and I had to go to the bathroom, and when I came out, this lady literally shoved into me and said, "Pervert," and she was about to hit or shove me again. Now, I'll admit, I was pissed, mainly at her, and a little at the judge, and so I shoved back into her and called her a biche. And before we could do anything else, we were stopped by some officers. We were both restrained, but she kept struggling and tried to hit me again. I was let go while another officer had to grab her by the arms and take her away. A bit later, I guess she'd been calmed down or something, and so we went back in and the judge had found out about the shoving, and so I guess this caused the judge to be divided on the decision. So now we're gonna have another court meeting in 2 days, since today's Easter. What's gonna happen is the police are going to do one of the scan things or whatever on my phone chip to check the files. I didn't know the police could check this stuff. Doesn't matter if it's deleted on your phone. If it was on there, it'll be found, and me and the entitled mom have to bring the people we know to describe us. It's kinda complicated, but I guess it's where they give the statements to describe you and tell the judge what kind of person you are. I'm thinking of asking the officers whose meal I paid for to be one of the people along with my manager. I'm sorry this isn't all that fun, but we might be able to win, so yay. I mean, that's pretty cool that you can catch them. It's so easy for people to just slip away into the crowd and be kind of lost forever and you never find them again. So that's good that this is actually going somewhere. I don't know, maybe I'll find out again later if he continues to update this. Anyways, this next story is an entitled parent story called EF Thinks It's Okay to Abduct His Family and Keep It Hostage. So this happened all the way back when I was around 12 years old. So back then, my mom, me, and my brother lived in a different country from my entitled father, though my mom and dad have not divorced to this day. So we occasionally flew over to visit my father, and this was one such visit. We planned to stay for something like 3 weeks. A week into our stay, he announces that plans have changed and we are to stay with him permanently. I stayed quiet during the following conversation. My mom says, "What?" She says, "I don't want you to go back to that country. I want you to stay here with me so I can raise my children as I want." She says, "You can't be serious. This was never planned and we already have tickets back home." He says, "That's not a problem. I destroyed the tickets and all your travel documents are safely locked away so that you cannot get new tickets." I don't remember the exact details of the rest of the conversation, but they argued for a while. The next day, my mom made up an excuse along the lines of us going to a cinema and dragged me and my brother to a police station, where she talked to some police officer. She says, "My husband seized all of our travel documents and wants to forcibly keep us in this country." The police officer says, "I'm afraid we can't help you, ma'am." She says, "He literally stole our travel documents and ripped them apart. We can only investigate real crimes, ma'am. Nothing you said implies he did any wrongdoing." My mom got angry and dragged us kids off out of the police department. Later, she went alone to the consulate of the country we came from and explained the situation of the consul. The consul was understanding and offered help, suggesting a plan of how to work out this situation. Once day D came up roughly a week or two later, my mom packed up all of our things in garbage bags, told the father that there's a lot of trash to throw out, so she'll take the kids along for the help. He seemed okay with that. Once we reached the trash containers, a car from the consulate waited us there. The driver handed us some new travel documents and tickets for the plane before driving us straight to the airport. The consulate was great, and I'm really grateful to the people who worked there back then. P.S. Unfortunately, Twisted Fate made it so I'm living with that entitled father at the moment, but it's a temporary state of affairs. And they added some edits. To add salt to the wound, my dad still believes he was right in that situation, and that my mom was treacherous and betrayed him. He also likes to rant at me almost every day about how all women are rotten, evil, and bad, which is particularly hurtful when I'm a trans woman, heavily implying he still sees me as a male, despite normally using the right pronouns. Generally, my entitled father's favorite abuse tactic was pressuring and intimidating me, my mom, and my brother into agreeing to some deal he'd come up with. Generally, those deals were ridiculous along the lines of, "You do literally everything I want, I do nothing in return, and you're happy about it." Then, if the deal was broken, he'd get extremely upset, yell at us for hours, call us deal-breaking liars and horrible people for lying to him and breaking his perfectly fair and honest deals, and finds ways to punish us. He did that exact thing here and called my mom a treacherous liar when we fled the country. Man, I don't know what country he's talking about, and she obviously wants to keep it a secret here, but it doesn't sound like a very nice place. It just sucks when people like that get away with being able to manipulate people around them. Okay, and on to the final story for today, called "Get Us in the Newspaper Because We Trimmed Part of Your Tree on Our Yard." Okay. So this happened around 2 years ago, and I still have people talking about it. So our neighbor, kind of an arse, has these big oak trees, easily 40 feet tall, and there are branches hung over into our yard. This began affecting how our grass grew because it didn't get enough sunlight, and my mom was working hard to get our yard pretty after some construction. So we went to the city, asked what and what we couldn't cut down, and they said anything over our property line we could cut. So we got to work. We hired a team with a lift to cut the trees, and all went well until the day after. We get a letter from the city and our neighbor. Now the city was saying that we had illegally cut his property without his consent, and that we may be fined. Then the neighbor started doing things. I woke up one morning and was looking out my window and saw this fool driving through the front part of our yard, leaving ruts. We called the non-emergency line and the police dispatched an officer to talk to him. Keep in mind we live on the water and we have a nice view. At which neighbors gets on his boat and drives away. Then the next day, our house was in the newspaper being called, I crap you not, tree killers. Now time for some malicious compliance. The neighbor had asked us never to touch his trees again, and we all did the same, to which he asks, "What trees?" And I just say, "You'll see." He laughed at me because I was 10. I went inside and helped my mom find 15 12-foot plus magnolia trees that were still growing. We bought them. 4 days later we had workers planting them in, and they had completely blocked his view of the harbor in my area, which is beautiful, and he couldn't and still can't do anything. Another reason why was the day before he had a camera installed facing my bedroom window. We called the non-emergency line again, and he drove away on his boat again. I later began mocking him on the camera by putting ads of nursing homes in the area, as he was older. When he got back, he was surprised. When he came back to find the trees, more like a wall, he freaked out and yelled. Anyways, that's my story. I have a few more to tell, and we'll share soon. Wait, so this story starts with, this happened 2 years ago, and then he says, he laughed at me because I was 10. So was this a 12-year-old telling this story? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this more diverse sort of video style. I mean, honestly, when it comes to these Reddit boards, it's kind of silly just how specific they want every board to be. Like, you try posting a story in an Entitled Parents, and then people are like, well, it's kind of like Entitled Parents, but it's more like a petty revenge story. Or you put a petty revenge story up, and they're like, well, it's kind of like that, but it's more like a choosing beggars story. And it's like, who cares? They're all the same stories. So that's why I'm just going to be putting all kinds of stories, and I don't really care what they're labeled as. So hope you're having a great Easter weekend, and thanks for watching.